Thank you for tuning in to Teaching for the Culture. And this is your host, Bianca Goolsby. And I have some fabulous educators in the building to talk about reopening schools. And each person was handpicked to have their own experience to bring to the table to have a very impactful conversation. So I want to go ahead and start introducing my guests. The first guest that is to my right is April Cobb. She is a phenomenal educator and she is working in East Tampa. Okay. Below April Cobb, you have Dr. Edwards. She is the executive director of a local charter school. So she has her own experience with the charter school network. And then to her left, we have my man, Seth, who is a educator working on his dissertation and is in higher education working on to best impact our children. And he currently works at a school in Tampa. So, hi, everyone. How are you guys doing today?
Doing
Hi, how
great.
y'all doing?
well.
Good.
So I'm so excited for those of you that are in. Please go ahead and make sure that you comment, make sure that you share this information because I really think that this is going to be impactful. And I also think that this is an opportunity to have teachers at the table. There's a lot of conversations with politicians, but we need to actually have the frontline workers to talk about their truth, their experience, and how they feel about the situation because at the end of the day, they're going to be the ones that's placed in it. So thank you guys for joining me. And I know we're a little late. We had some technical difficulties, but like I said, we were not denied with this, and I'm glad everything's working out. So I want to get started. The first thing I want to do is I want to play a video clip so that opens up the discussion. And this video clip is what's taking place in China currently with the COVID-19.
开学之后就是中考的这个时间比较紧促，然后我们要抓紧时间学习，因为我们之前也定了目标，为了自己理想的高中而努力。然后开学之后我们也要更加勤奋的努力，因为时间很紧，考上自己一个理想的高中。
So what do y'all think about that video? Start with April.
Well, what I do, what it makes me begin to think about is that here in our city of Tampa, we're not prepared to be able to shift in that direction that they currently are demonstrating that they were prepared to do. Now we don't know when they started that implementation of what all they're doing, but it makes me fearful.
Seth, what about you?
That was very difficult to watch
Yes, it was.
because it just shows a new reality that it's a new reality for those students. And I can just think about the psychological impact, like that one ninth grade student who it seemed like his class job was to wipe everything down. And I can just imagine just the emotional impact for both staff and students. And it really makes me question, are we really prepared for that? Are we emotionally and physically prepared for all that change?
What about you, Dr. Edwards?
Yeah, so actually, that was a light one from the first one that I've seen about how schools in China reopened, and I it was a little jarring. I think to me, honestly, the most jarring piece was the number of kids in the building. So we have schools of 300, 500, 800, 1,200 kids. And when you saw the number of kids that they were allowing in the building, it was like 10, 12, maybe, 30 at the most. And I'm thinking, well, where is everyone else? And what are we supposed to
Mhm.
do with the rest of our scholars if we're only letting 30 of them on the campus? So I'm ready for the conversation. What do we do?
Yeah. And so that's what I want to talk about is your thoughts and opinions. And I'm going to open the floor for this discussion. And for those of you that have questions that want to call in and talk about it, I did go ahead and open the phone lines for it. So at the bottom, it is the call in number for you to voice your thoughts as well and speak with the educators because these are the subject experts. We're not talking with politicians that have their own agendas. We're actually talking about people who are on the front lines that have a major stake at this. So, what do you guys think?
So, if I could speak to what Dr. Edwards was saying about our buildings that house 1,200, 3,000 students. I mean, I know at Leonard alone, they have their population is going up. One of the things I'm hearing discussed is that instead of having every site open, we might only have a couple hundred sites open that can accommodate large capacity of students, but spread out so that the interactions could satisfy the CDC requirement of the social distancing. But let's ask this question: will we then be helping our communities out? Because more than likely, we're going to have to bus those kids to different areas of town that are completely strange. We could be having a repetition of the same scenario we had a couple of years ago with one middle school in Brandon that's working with a population in central Tampa, and there was a disconnect there. So, to Dr. Edwards' comment, maybe that's an option that they have, but that in itself could present a lot of equity issues.
For me, I feel that it's important for all stakeholders to be able to voice, you know, what their overall impact is going to be for them as it relates to their families. Because we're speaking from a place of from the education, platform, but I think the conversations really need to be coming heavily from the people that is going to impact the most, and that's the parents of those children. Because for me, I just do not feel comfortable sending my children back to school. So therefore, I have to make, a decision for them to say, even if the district comes up with a plan, will that plan be concrete enough to where I have a belief that they're going to be safe in that environment? I just don't see that that could be done because children are going to be children. They're going to horseplay. You got the ones just defiant in nature and, still trying to learn their way. But the bottom line is then it comes upon me. Do I feel safe having children in the classroom that I know do all of those things that I just mentioned, and then happen to be responsible for protecting other children from all of the craze that could possibly go on? So, back to what both Dr. Edwards and Seth is saying is that psychologically, we're not prepared. None of us are prepared for that. And number two, I just pray that whatever decision that they come forth with, that they really take a look at it from a position of the child in the classroom, then their peers with them, then the teacher, and just keep building that way. Because looking at it globally, that's just, it's not a global fix. It's just not.
Yeah. And Dr. Edwards is having technical difficulties, so she messaged me. She said she was going to come back on. So when she comes in, I'll add her to the conversation.
Okay.
So my question is like, so currently, when we were in school, we had issues with not even having soap, not even having, toilet paper, not even having some of those supplies. So it really makes me concerned. Are we truly prepared to open schools? And do you think that having these conversations prematurely about reopening schools, knowing that we don't have some of those basic fundamental things, do you guys believe that that's problematic?
Of course. Of course.
Well, I don't think it's problematic per
It's
se.
problematic.
I think what Superintendent Davis for Hillsborough County did yesterday, as far as outlining his team, the most difficult conversation they're going to have right now is not about curriculum, not about, you know, the SEL portion, is how do we build that infrastructure? We have to start planning now because, as we probably all agree, a lot of our schools in this area are in a dilapidated state. So then it brings in the question, do you send them to the newer schools? Do you use the schools that are probably more up to date and can handle the conversion process? And I feel that the conversations have to start now, because we don't know what August is going to look like. We really don't. And I know some people may say it's too premature. I say we have to have it now because we just don't know.
I think now is the absolute perfect time to have the conversation. And honestly, we're a little bit behind the eight ball in having the conversation. As an administrator, I just realized and recognized some of the CDC regulations that they put in place for us to reopen schools. We're below the threshold of what we need to be today. And so for us to get where we need to be, it's going to take us time. So, for example, we know that some schools don't have enough coverage for custodians to truly go in and clean, and now us establish the proper cleaning scheduling to make things happen. Some schools are not outfitted with soap dispensers. We're not outfitted with the hand sanitizers with the 80% alcohol requirements. So there's a lot. We don't have no-touch trash cans throughout all buildings. So, like, just getting your finances in order, getting all of those things in place, like all of that work has to be done like immediately right now.
And to reference back to the reason why I think it's problematic is because there is a high number of schools that are not equipped, and with the children knowing and the parents knowing and the staff that work at those site bases knowing this, it just creates a unnecessary anxiety to come to terms and say that by the time we return to school, all of those areas of concerns that were there before COVID-19, we're going to fix them and do additional. That's not realistic. For number one, we're already looking at the issue of money becoming a problem. At some point, the money is going to run out. That's just obvious. It's not a fluid point of where money is just going to constantly flow in. And then secondly, how are they going to maintain that daily? Because this is not the kids come on campus and we walk away. No, that has to be maintained daily throughout the day. And are we asking the teachers to constantly clean throughout the day? Or are we going to have some staff that's equipped to know how to properly clean like that daily? Because again, I am a teacher that was sweeping, swifting, wiping desks down, providing paper towels, hand sanitizer, soap, all of that at my school site. So, and there are a lot of schools that were experiencing that prior to Addison Davis coming here. So I do appreciate all that he is, verbally stating that he intends to do. And I'm pretty sure he's going to do, make great efforts to make it happen. But I also always sit back and have to be realistic because I'm not new in Hillsborough County. This is my 22nd year. So we had majority of those problems before COVID-19. So until we address how we're going to apply some changes to what was already happening, I just don't see how we're going to be prepared and ready in August to do those things and additional services. I just don't see it realistic. It sounds good, and if it's done, great, phenomenal, kudos. But realistic, I don't know. Where's the manpower coming from?
I think that's a big issue. Like, what is the manpower demand? Like, if you're supposed to, according to CDC regulations, clean the buses every day.
Wait,
Like,
now it's daily throughout the day.
It's throughout the
well,
day.
I'm just talking about the buses. So the
I
buses
know.
run twice, right? So, well, yeah, you're right, because the buses run back to back to back.
So my question to this is, you know, we're being put, schools are being put under a lot of this pressure
Mm-hmm.
to really step up to the game. Where's the private sector? Where are some of these other businesses who, yes, they are affected by COVID-19, but there's an opportunity for them to come into the schools to assist with the lack of manpower. You know, I'm hoping that it's not going to become a contract thing, but there is a need for the private sector to possibly examine what we need, because to your point, Dr. Edwards, I can see them training bus drivers to clean the buses down every time. And right now they're still in negotiations for pay. They're going to have that
Right.
pay on top of the extra responsibilities. I mean, my question is, where's the private sector? Where's the private sector coming in and trying to help us out? Not from a contract point of view, but trying to help us create these solutions.
That's a
Well, the
great
problem
question.
is that's a great question, and part of that is capitalism. But
Mm-hmm.
but we have children that are being bused to school, and they're sitting three to a seat. Where's the social distancing with that? I mean, I just being realistic on how there's buses where the bus drivers, they're already short manpower, they are dealing with issues pre-existing COVID, where they had to clean their buses. They had their buses parked in a place that was unsecure. People were breaking into the buses, leaving trash everywhere at the buses. This was taking place all before COVID. And then now you're saying that the bus drivers are going to have to clean up. How are they going to do social distancing? And I guess like it's so overwhelming to dissect, because we are really starting to think about the things that we've been doing and trying to completely change everything to make it beneficial for our kids to learn. And I guess, what do you guys think would be a start? Like, I don't even know how to unpack that.
So, from a macro perspective, we have to have a plan of what buildings can we use to sustain the most. What buildings can be used to sustain the best social distancing? And because some of those elementary schools, you know, their areas are not big enough. I think we need to start there, looking at our facilities. But you know, I start thinking about that, and then I start thinking about the busing issue. The busing issue comes right back into my mind. And my next question to that is, what if the kid comes, we're doing screenings, and the kid has 104 fever? We know that there are a lot of students in our counties that if you send them back home, there's nobody there to take them. So what do they do now?
No.
So one of the ideas that I've heard of other networks in my area of charter discussing is the idea of using like on site as a space, a safe haven. So for those scholars that we know don't have anyone at home, don't have any support, would not be able to sustain remote learning for a long-term basis, then the school building becomes a safe haven for them. Everyone else who can sustain this, right? Because there are a lot of people who can do this, right? It's not ideal, it's not what they desire, but for those who can do it, like we would ask them to do it, like, because you do this remotely if you can. And for everyone else who we know cannot, like it is not an option, that we kind of centralize our resources on that population and have them come into the buildings. And then we will be a little bit more able and capable of practicing social distancing and providing them with the support that they need. You could still have that teacher teach remotely, but that kid would be on the campus. You could still have teachers teaching remotely, right? Kids are on campus with their computers, with their headphones. They just have to have someone there to support them so that they're not at home alone by themselves, sleeping all day and not, getting work done or, just roaming the streets. So those are the types of ideas that I've heard floating around of like, hey, maybe we do a hybrid model of remote learning and brick and mortar, using that brick and mortar opportunity to really support those kids who actually need us to support them versus those who could manage with parents in the home.
And based on the digital divide, then you will have some pop school sites where you're going to have at least 75% or more of the kids need to come on campus, my site being one of them, because of the simple fact that the economy requires and putting a demand that people go back to work. So there are types of jobs, that the majority may have is going to be your fast foods, your what you call them, work at the hospitals and the nutrition department. They're not going to be the white collar type jobs. So
Right.
there are going to be demands placed upon those parents or guardians that's going to say, okay, you have to go to school. And I know with charter, it may be, it's a lot smaller than your traditional setting. So then you have a high population of those students that are ESE. It's really not an option for them not to be on campus to get their face-to-face hour and so on and so forth. But the bottom line goes back to any event we do. I know back in the days when my aunt them were in school, they went to King High School. They used to have session A and session B. Well, one go in the morning, one go in the afternoon. But the difference was they didn't have a lot of usage for school buses back then. A lot of them walked. So everybody that lived in Nucio, you walked to King. Even all the way as far as Grant Park, you walked to King. Even far as Oak Park, you walked to King. So
So we got a caller, April. So
okay.
Hold on. All right, so hold on 1 second. I want April to finish her thought, and then I'm gonna let you talk. Okay, 1 second.
I got it.
All right,
So
go
I
ahead.
just wanted to say with the session A and session B, it is realistic in the event that you had a lot of parents that would be capable of transportation, but then it goes back to, do they have to work? And at my site, we have over 20 buses that bring the kids to school. So right now, if we use just my site as an example of how to fix it, I would love to hear it, even with session A, session B, because remember, we're short bus driver.
Right. So caller, how you doing?
Hey everybody, what's up, Sam? How was everybody doing today?
Doing good. What you got to say?
Okay, what I have to say is I'm gonna respond to Seth's comment about kids who are sick in school. Okay, so that's a big thing for us where you don't have a lot of people who are able to take the child back home when the child is sick. That's first of all. Second, are you gonna have enough medical staff, enough social workers? You're gonna need who are going to be able to either spend time with the kids, attend to their other needs and their other resources, because right now as it stands, just like you're talking about the ESOL kids, the ELL kids, the kids with the ESE, all those extra specialized needs, you're going to need more hands-on. So that's my concern. My concern is not having enough nursing staff and also not having enough additional resources available for the kids. And I got to go because mama's going to call me instead. Love y'all.
All right, love you. Thank you for calling.
Bye.
Look, this is so interesting to me that we bring that up, because I even wonder, like, okay, yeah, we're talking about if we're testing, right? So that's another big thing. Like, kids have to be tested before they come in the building. We do like that flash thermometer, which we don't have right now. So I don't know who's going to make those and ship those. And
that's $100. That's $100. Just, I tried to buy one because of the COVID shortage, and it was the cheapest one was $100.
So we're supposed to do that, but when are we supposed to do that? Are we supposed to do that at the bus stops? Because if we don't, and they get on the bus and they breathe all over all the kids on the bus all the way to school, and then we're going to test them at school? I mean, then what are we doing here?
Seth, so that's a good question. So before they get to the school, Seth, or let's pretend they came on the bus to school. So now do we quarantine all those kids because the person on the bus had a high fever? Beth, you frozen? Can Beth hear me?
I don't
It looks
know.
like his fan is still going. I don't know.
What's going on?
Oh, we couldn't hear you.
Oh, I'm listening to Miss Cobb's question. I didn't hear it.
I said, so we have the children come on the bus, and one gets off the bus, their temperature's taken is 104. So what do we do with those kids that were on the bus with that child?
There seems to be something wrong. What did she ask? I'm so sorry.
So she had asked if, if the temperature was taken of the child when they arrived to school after they've been on the bus and they have a fever. Are we going to quarantine all the kids that was on the bus because the wheels on the bus go round and round?
Well, China, according to what they've been saying, is that they invested a lot into the N95 masks. Like they did an overproduction. That's probably why I can't find any on Amazon anymore. But all those children have that, so they're constantly disposing it and getting new ones. They have quarantine rooms. But here's the thing. The caller brought up a good point. Dr. Edwards brought up a good point as well. You know, this is such a virus that is morphing. I mean, new things are coming out about it every day. And so you brought up a good point, Dr. Edwards. Okay, so do we scan them at the bus stop? And if you scan them at the bus stop and the bus driver's like, sorry, gotta go home, what does that parent do then? That parent might have to go to work, and you're leaving the child at home alone with a high fever. I mean, the infrastructure, let's just be honest, I think we can all agree on this. The infrastructure is just not there. And if it's there, I mean, we're at a loss. Like, for example, we have the Children's Board. The Children's Board does a lot with early education. How can they come in and help us out with this situation? With county funds? Why does it have to be a separate entity?
That is a great question.
That's a wonderful question.
So I want to share this information from the CDC in regards to their process of when we should reopen schools or not. And maybe this can provide clarity to anyone that's watching about this tree that they published. So I know that it's going to be difficult for you to see it because the words are small. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy and paste, and I'm going to put the link in here for anyone to see it. But basically, this is a chart to go over if, we should consider opening schools or not. And if we don't have these procedures in place, the CDC says meet safeguards first. And this is something that they posted in regards to opening schools. And they posted this after Donald Trump said that we should open schools and, have the economy going. So the CDC responded with, this is the safeguards. So based off this, we know looking at this, our school is not equipped. So I want to know, what is your thoughts on this?
So what's interesting here is the CDC put out regulations and the president said that they were too restrictive. So they rolled back their regulations. But even in this rolled back set of regulations, like in the first tier is, can you test kids to see if they have, and employees to see if they have a fever? Well, we don't have that. So like literally it's still no. Like I don't even know where we would begin to gather all of what we need to actually get to a point of where in the state of Florida, for the millions of kids that we serve, we're going to be able to test every child and every adult that comes on the campus.
And don't leave out the word daily.
Daily.
Right.
Yeah. And it says, and history of exposure. I mean, come on.
Well, and it also goes back to, I mean, I had a faculty meeting recently, and we were talking about the packets, and the front office plainly said, we are not opening those packets. We are not touching those packets anymore. And that was the first time that I realized something as innocent as an educational tool can become a weapon. It can become sort of a cocoon of a virus. So that in itself scared me, just listening to that. And again, I think we can all come back that from the different perspectives we're having, what do we constantly come back to? We constantly come back to, I don't know, or we're not there. And can we, and then I guess the next question is, can we get there? Obviously by August, it's not going to happen. If we try in August, we're going to fail miserably. We're probably going to increase the number of cases. So then it's, could we do it by September? I mean, Dr. Edwards, from your perspective, could your school update itself by September?
I think that's a really great question. I think that even my school could be ready for a hybrid model in September. I would say we would be ready for a hybrid model in September. But the ramp up of things that we would need to even make that hybrid model be successful, it's still pulling a lot of resources together to make that take place. So, even something as simple as employee training, like we actually are ending the school year. So we're supposed to, I guess employees don't get a summer break because we're going to do all of this training for identifying kids who are sick and what the symptoms are and what they should be looking for, because that's in the guidelines, is that your employees have to be trained on the all the things to look for, which we know are morphing literally every day, right? So how are we supposed to train people to identify symptoms that morph every day? And we're not 100% sure. And even in our little community, because I know a lot of people may say, oh, we're fear mongering because we really haven't had that level of issue in Florida that they've seen in places like New York or Michigan. I mean, but the truth of the matter is our cases have been rising. Like since we've started opening up the state, cases definitely in Hillsborough County have continued to increase. The number of deaths have continued to increase. And I'm monitoring our local hotspots. Like, and South Tampa is a hotspot. Wesley Chapel area is a hotspot. I'm monitoring these hotspots to see, like, where is it popping up and where is it growing? So we are continuing to see cases, and we do not have a vaccine. So could we open up? Absolutely, with a hybrid model, though. I would not be comfortable saying, hey, let's just go back to life as normal, things as usual. Day 1, August 10th, let's roll.
Let me just say this. So right before we left for Christmas break, there was a young man in my classroom, and it was clear that that child was very ill, very sick. Again, as the teacher, walk over, feel his head. He had to have a fever well over 100, literally sweating, coughing, wiping his nose, wiping his mouth, all on the jacket. The kids want to move away from him, but there's nowhere for them to go besides push your desk over a little bit and move on. Now, with knowing that right now in the back of my head, I was standing in front of him less than 6 feet apart because I'm in the front of the classroom, and that's, his desk was in the front. I would not feel comfortable, being that I do not have a medical background, to make the decision to start looking for, because remember, they always say teachers, we shouldn't be diagnosing and all this other stuff. I just don't feel that that is something that should be put on a teacher's plate. We're not physicians. I don't have a nursing background outside of a little CPR to save a life when they're in trouble, till somebody in the medical field could come help them and move it further. I just wouldn't feel that comfortable. And we're keeping you, and I don't think that even the CDC and who the world, what is called the World Health, whatever it is, who for me, who. So I don't think that the people making those decisions realize that we are human too. And those same things that you're asking me to do, first you might want to ask me, can I do it effectively? I mean, that might bring onset anxiety for me. That might bring about, destroying my mental capacity where I'm already fearful of being in that environment. And now I have a kid come in and they look like they have the symptoms, or I might just be prematurely overreacting. So again, I don't think too many educators are at the table when they're having these discussions around education. So that's just my thought. Just wanted to share that.
My
Well, and
question is,
another,
what about the
oh, go
people
ahead.
that are asystematic? What about the children that are asystematic and they don't have any symptoms? They don't exhibit any symptoms, but yet they're around the kids. So I want to sit that there, because there are children that are asymptomatic and you start exhibiting signs 14 days later, and they have infected several other people.
Well, and another thing that we haven't talked about is our human capital. If Dr. Edwards' hybrid model, does actually come into existence, what about those employees who have pre-existing conditions that put them at higher risk if they caught COVID? So then do they get first pick to become remote teachers? Do they get sent to the remote sector? Or for those that maybe their immune systems are stronger, they're put into the schools that the likelihood of them catching it, maybe they already have the antibodies. That's going to become an issue as far as pay goes. That's going to become an issue as far as health insurance goes. And I know that the unions are starting to ask their members, what would you like us to argue for? Because if I was told, I have asthma, I'm able to control it, I'm fine, but I'm told you're too much of a high risk, so we're going to put you in front of the computer again. This has been very hard. I can't see the students. I can't build relationships. And that on my psyche was hard. That social emotional piece hurt me just as much as it hurt them. So, then we're going to get into so many different things about which personnel gets to stay and which personnel has to go to the remote part.
You are honest, because I really thought about that. Like when we were having those conversations about, okay, a hybrid model, who's on campus and who's not. Like there is like the equity of that, right? Like, do I say, like, how do I formulate my response to a teacher to say, I need you to be a frontline worker? Your co-teacher needs to be out because of a pre-existing condition, but I'm going to put you at risk. You who have children at home, I'm
Right.
going to allow you to be exposed and have the possibility of catching this, and then take that home to your kids, right? Like I have a strong immune system, I'm healthy, but my daughter has every allergy you could think of and asthma and everything else. So it's like, well, I would be fine going out there, but you know what? I can't take that home, because if I take that home, what happens to her, right? I have parents who are very high risk. I can't go to their house. I can't take her to their house, right? Like just all of those factors come into play, even when we're deciding like, okay, we'll do a hybrid model. But the teachers, we cannot forget, as you say, human capital. We are real people, right? Living real lives outside of our jobs. And we love what we do, and we are 1000% committed. But we want to know that our system cares about us as well.
Well, and it's interesting that you talk about, the domino effect. For example, my spouse's company, they have vehemently told that if you have a spouse or someone in the house that has it, even if you quarantine, you're not allowed to go to work. But FEMA, the FMLA can't cover that. FMLA cannot cover that.
That's crazy.
The short term, per the company's policy, it can't cover that because you're technically not the sick one and you can't take care of them because of the CDC regulations. So we are possibly putting a lot more families at risk. And, I would be willing to go in. I'm not as svelte as I used to be, but I would be willing to go in and see my kids and take all the precautions in the world. But a 30-year-old veteran or a 30-year veteran who is in great shape, loves what they do, but they meet a criteria, and you tell them they have to go home. We
And
have
then if we look,
volunteers, and then we have voluntold.
and if we look at that even further, how the impact has proven to be more great for the African American community, where a lot of our youth are being taken care of or provided for by Big Mama them and Grandpa and them, that scares the hell out of me right there. That's scary, y'all. Because again, diabetes, unfortunately, that's a norm in most of our families. High blood pressure, that's like a norm in the African, like those are norms. And should it be that way? No, but beyond the fact, that's what it is.
That's
So
reality.
if we
So
look at
can I
that,
throw? Oh, go ahead.
no, go ahead.
So can I throw a couple of things out there, right? I actually want to play the other role. I don't
Mhm.
call it devil's advocate because I don't have nothing to do with the devil, but I want to see what the other side of this looks like, and just think through, like, what if we took a Switzerland, right? Was it Switzerland or Sweden? Swedish approach, and said, okay, we are just gonna do, what is it called? Herd. What is it called? Come on,
I don't
somebody.
remember what it was called, but I did watch a video or
Where
two
we
on it.
decide, let's just expose everybody as much as possible and see what happens, right? Like, that's a whole nother strategy that we didn't take the United States, but it looks like we're starting to pivot that way, where we just literally expose as many people as possible to it, so that we have the opportunity to, like, develop our immune systems to be able to, like, fight against it. Like, what if we went that route and just said, okay, at this point, we're just going to put a line in the sand, like, everybody tries to, like, not that we are out trying to be exposed, but literally allow the thing to work its way through. Herd immunity. Thank you. Herd immunity. Thank you, Natasha.
Well, with all the vaccinations that the kids already have to get before they come into school, and then with the anti-vaccine movement still strong, they're still strong. I think we would hit every single wall we could think of. We would hit that would be in litigation for years to come. And then as I'm listening, okay, the hybrid, we can't guarantee that. Okay, we can't guarantee the hybrid. But we're going to stay in remote learning. For those students who we've identified as having the least amount of access, we have hubs for them to come to at least get the learning, and then they go home. The question is, can the equity be there to ensure that if you are identified as not having access, will you still be getting the same, the same level of materials that someone that already does at home?
Unless educators are all taken back to a place of where we get the necessary training to be effective, like virtual teachers, then no, it's impossible, because that's not the instructional design we learn how to be prepared for going in a classroom. Brick and mortar, virtual. Individuals that are virtual teachers, they go through, extensive training in preparation for that. And for my friend girl that is a virtual teacher on Hillsborough Virtual, she shared that she could not have imagined having to do that for 100+ kids, because of middle school initially, because that's not how it's rolled out for them. They are gradually getting more students as the process becomes more familiar with them, in addition to their training. So that right there is just, that's equitably, no, it just wouldn't happen. No. And then you have your teachers that are you have your older teachers, seasoned teachers, that if I got 5 more years to go, I'm not doing all of that. They've not been comfortable with technology for years now. And to force upon them to say, okay, you got to learn how to do it this way, and this way. Otherwise, you're not meeting the children's needs. So there's a lot of different variables that, can be, thrown at that particular scenario right there. But let's think back a little further. One of my friend girls that's on here, she said that What if we sent kids back to what if we sent kids back to their neighborhood schools? Well, that's the problem. In the event our children was going to their neighborhood schools, we wouldn't have a lot of these issues. We wouldn't, because transportation wouldn't be at the forefront of the conversation. But we've taken so many of our children and busing them across the district, where some of them are spending hours on buses because their neighborhood schools are now, what you call it, magnet schools, IB schools. For
Right.
example, Williams Middle Magnet. For example, Young Middle Magnet. So those housing developments that used to, Orange Grove Middle Magnet. So if we take a look at Oak Slide Middle Magnet, so let's just be honest. We took all of the resources, educational resources, and now the majority of our children can't go to their school that's up the street around the corner that grandma and them, auntie and them went to. And I'm gonna be quiet, y'all, because I'm about to get angry about it. Let me turn myself off. I'm about to get mad.
Well, no, I mean, it's a really great point, right? Like, if
Yeah.
we're looking at what models would work going forward, like, that's a model that has to be back on the table of, okay, why are we busing? Like, ask that question. Why are we busing across the district? How about we stop doing that and let kids walk to the school, where we could actually test and say, okay, no, turn around and walk back home, right? Versus getting on a bus and exposing more people. Like, literally, that has to be part of the dialogue. And one thing, I'm just gonna throw this in because I said this back in March or April when we first started this, is a moratorium on testing for 2021. I'm just saying.
Well, and
Testing.
I actually responded to a Facebook post of what is the one thing you want to see come out of, and I'm just going to say, no one jumped at me. What do you want to see come out of the COVID-19 pandemic? And I said the eradication or the intense lessening of standardized tests. Because if they're going to try to do 2020,
Yes,
2021, it's inconceivable that you are going to possibly demand a child who has gone through summer with the fear of A, not knowing what's going to happen, B, an adequate learning plan that we're going to try our best to make happen, but that funds may not necessarily be there, because the media hasn't been talking about this, but the district has spent a lot of money in making those meals happen. Those funds did not come from the federal. Those were funds that were already there. And they had to spend a lot of their own general fund to make that happen. So that's why Superintendent Davis predicted that 10% shortfall. And that's why he's trying to reorganize everything. But why not stop the testing, as Dr. Edwards is saying, use all that money from all that stuff.
Come on, Seth.
And then put it.
Come on, Seth.
Put it in, because I think if anything has come out of this, the testing removed, what happened? Everybody took a breath. Now my kids were bummed, which I was shocked about. They were like, we wanted to show them. We wanted to prove we could do it. But then they were like, oh my God, I can actually go to the next grade and not worry about things. So how about this be the turning point where we say, you know what? Do we really need those things? And even more, use that contract and take all that money and put it right back in.
That's a multi-million-dollar industry contracts, like from UPS on down, right? Whoever gets the contract to deliver the boxes makes millions of dollars on testing, right? So, like, literally, we could save our system millions of dollars, our state hundreds of millions of dollars, if we just did not test.
And going back to your point, Dr. Edwards, about the busing system, actually eliminating that could actually increase the millage, which is part of the formula for funding. That could actually increase the millage for a lot of areas. possibly adding even more money into certain schools, and also questioning, why do certain schools have to be all magnet or all this? Why can't it be a partial so that everybody has access? Because I'm telling you, if you eliminate that busing, watch some of those areas increase in their millage, and then the formula is going to benefit them even more.
That's a mouthful. And I go back to the point about, if to the neighborhood schools, someone had commented and said if neighborhood schools were better, things would be different. And I just want to just say here that that was done by design. And part of that was done by design was the standardized testing piece that we're talking about. So if we get rid of this standardized testing that has proven to not be essential. Remember, this testing is no longer essential in COVID. If we keep that same energy and we have the intentionality to make sure that every school is getting everything that they're supposed to be getting, then we wouldn't have to have a federal oversight for a desegregation order in the city of Tampa because they didn't want to desegregate these schools and have equity in the foundation.
Say it again for the people in the back. I know that was a lot. Just sum it up. Say it again. I don't think half the people heard what you said. One more time.
I'm going to just sum it up and just basically say that there's a history here. It was done by design. And so our community schools will be better if we are intentional and we have the same resources and equity. And we can't keep putting magnet programs to fluff up the numbers, and be intentional with the kids that are there and meet the kids where they're at. And if you meet the kids where they're at, then we probably wouldn't have to have these magnet schools to fluff up the data and fluff up these numbers to say that we're doing something. That's all I'm saying.
And furthermore, asking ourselves, why are certain schools designated as only magnet? Why aren't all schools designated as partial and everybody has access to
Great question.
the magnet opportunities? Because to me, one, you're doing a disservice to the community where you just say, okay, this school is magnet only. So where do those kids go? They're going to a strange neighborhood. They don't know their surroundings. Make every school inclusive. Even if it's a magnet school, let them have access to the program and let them be a part of it. Let their community be a part of it. And I think that goes back to what Bianca was saying, is just strip down the barrier.
Yes.
Just say, let's all have the same options.
One of my former co-workers, her twins go over to Williams Middle Magnet. She lives on the outskirts of Ruskin. They take the bus, y'all.
Wait, what?
One of my former colleagues, she has twins. She lives on the outskirts of Ruskin, and they go to Williams Middle Magnet. And one of the children
What did she say? I didn't hear her.
She was saying that there is a person that she knows that has a set of twins, and they live off the outskirts of Ruskin, and they are bused to Williams Middle Magnet. That is a long
30
commute.
to 40-minute bus ride.
Yes, it is. And now this is the question one of the children had was, why does it look like this in this neighborhood? A child is asking that. Why we come to this school, and he says, but why does the neighborhood looks like this?
Wow.
Well, they're leaving their homes that's $300,000 or more. And they're being driven past all the
But perhaps now we're stumbling on, we've been talking about, well, what's the way the infrastructure isn't ready? We're now talking about two possible avenues that could open up the discussion. Elimination of standardized testing, which is a multi-million-dollar market that we know of. We know the contracts that we could take back. And then also repurposing. Notice how I said repurposing the transportation routes of the district. Now we possibly have options in enhancing the infrastructure. We're not even talking about updating all these schools. I mean, we can all agree we don't know where that's going to come from, but we now have a potential funding source. The unfortunate thing is now we're getting into politics, and we're getting into federal and state hands that are being shady behind the scenes.
That is accurate.
And I just really appreciate this discussion and having you guys on here. And really, I mean, this has really compounded the first conversation of should we reopen schools? I think the general consensus is no. But then with that, exposing the layers of what's happening behind the scenes that is preventing us to getting to the root. And the root is back to the busing issues, the issues with segregation, desegregation, all of those components, the lack of equity, and also the transportation crisis we have, and then the standardized testing that no longer became essential in COVID.
Yep, there you go. You summed it up.
Mm-hmm. Well, this is an opportunity, though. This is an opportunity because we just adopted new standards. And we already have a rollout plan of what's supposed to happen with those new standards. Now, I think that the state petitions the federal government for waivers all the time for everything. Like the state could petition the federal government and say, hey, we need a waiver and we're going to just implement our new standards and we're going to roll out our new tests for the new standards in 2 years. Right? I mean, they could do that, right? And I think that under the current administration, that would probably be accepted. But we could eliminate this barrier for at least a few years and see what would education look like if we did not have this hanging over our heads, right? And, and it's not that we would see a decrease because teachers are working harder than they've ever worked before. Right?
My God.
They don't have that extra pressure of you can lose your job if, right? These kids 2 years from now don't score well on a test, right? Because we know it's a 3-year window. So you're being held accountable for kids who you haven't seen for 2 years. So if we took that away for a few years and said, hey, let's just really try to figure out a model of what works well so that we can start to truly push the boundaries and see equity happening in our schools, like what would that look like? I get giddy with excitement and anticipation because we could do so much to really start trying to eliminate barriers.
I'm so sorry to interrupt, but that also goes back to a comment that was made a long time ago during the FCAT days. They always used to say, what California does with education, the entire nation does. Florida has an opportunity. If our governor is truly going to be the education governor, the teacher's governor, I'm using his words, not mine, I'm using his words. He has a very unique opportunity to elevate Florida, not as the laughing joke of education, but as a potential avenue of what if.
To try something new. That's the thing, to go in a different direction. Florida is not California. Try something different. And it's okay if we don't do well at the first try at it. Give us opportunity more than 2 to 3 years before we start looking at the new shiny light and ready to jump on and do something else. So you're right. That would be very proactive on his end to try something different.
Yeah. This has been a lightning conversation, and I want to encourage more of them. And so for those of you that are listening, that want to continue this conversation, for you guys that are here, if you want to hop on and continue this conversation and have little segments, I'm open to it. I think this is what this platform is for, to just give teachers a voice at the table so that they can express their thoughts and how they feel, because oftentimes a lot of politicians and things, they do not bring teachers to the table, although you guys are on the front lines working every single day hard for the kids. So I just want to say thank you for spending time with me and spending time and having this conversation. It really means a lot to me. And I'm just excited for what's going to come. But I think the call to action here, because I'm all about, call to action and what's to do. I think the call to action is to really rally our governor to really be intentional with how they're going to change the laws moving forward. So that way we can get to the root, which is what Seth was talking about, the infrastructure. So that way we can start having conversations on what school would look like moving forward. But with the standardized testing and all of this stuff looming over the heads of educators, it seems virtually impossible unless that gets done. So I just want to open up for any final words that you guys want to share, and then we'll close out.
If I could start off, I know that we've been talking about teachers, administrators, and I know that there's usually the battle between admin versus teachers. All of us have been working really, really hard. All of us have been working really hard together as a cohesive group, something that I think a lot of schools haven't seen in a while. And I'm talking generalized, but we've become warriors together, and we are really trying to push for the interest of our kids. And I'm hopeful that this spirit of unity between those two groups continues forward, that it's a collective mission, not you're just trying to evaluate us or you're not doing what I asked you to do. That now we have a collective mission and we have a collective vision on how to do these things. And admins who are listening, teachers who are listening, school board members, everybody, just know we are really in this together. This is not silo work anymore, folks. We are in this together. Because I know Dr. Edwards, I've spoken to Dr. Edwards. I know she's working her butt off. Even as an admin. So I want to give thanks to all the other people out there as well, not just teachers.
Absolutely. Anybody else? Any words?
No, I think he had an amazing wrap up, and I would just include that that's all sectors of education as well. It's not just teachers and admins, but it's public, it's charter, it's private, it's virtual. It's homeschool. We are all in this together, right? Because this is a global pandemic. It has never happened before to us in our lifetime, right? 1918, nobody was an adult during that time who could come back with wisdom and tell us what happened. So this is our first go around with a global pandemic, and we're all in this together, and we're all just trying to figure it out. So I've been leading with grace over grades, right? Compassion over compliance, right? Right. Let's be real over trying to have rigor. All of those things really matter as we move forward and create a plan for what education looks like post COVID-19.
Well, thank you guys so much for tuning in to Teaching for the Culture. And until next time, folks, bye.